was doing my year-long challenge, you connected with me on Instagram, didn't you? And there was we had an automatic connection, and there was times throughout the year where I was struggling, and he seemed to pick up on that, even though we haven't met, and he'd drop me a message on the times I was struggling and stuff. So, and then he eventually come down, joined in with the rest of the dippers, and I started off the podcast with another bloke who didn't have mental health problems or addiction or nothing. I wanted to have two sides of the fence on each story, but the problem was that he wasn't very passionate about mental health, so it's hit and miss. Jack come on and shared his story, and we just clicked, and I asked Jack to co-host it with me, and we haven't looked back since, and we've had some really inspirational guests. Some of them are in the room today. With that being said, I'd like Jack to come and tell his story.
Right, hello everyone.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
I just want to thank you all for coming today. That's a really important thing, not only for Sam, but for lots of people sort of involved in today, so thank you. And it's lovely to be able to stand up here and have a chance to talk. If anyone's listened to the podcast, I don't get a lot of chance to talk, but so my story. So I had a very privileged upbringing. I was very, very fortunate. I had a happy family, went to private school, on holidays every year, played a lot of sport, lots of rugby, lots of boxing, all sorts. Everything was kind of going really well. Finished sixth form, decided to go off to university, which I did. And it was around about this time I was experiencing some kind of family issues. So my mum and my dad were going through some difficulties, and it looked likely that they were going to end up going through kind of divorce proceedings. So as you can probably imagine, lots of emotions up and down, but I was very focused on just going off to uni and engrossing myself in that. But around about this time I was speaking to my mum on the phone a lot. She was getting very upset, so I didn't feel comfortable being at a long distance. So I came back and went to the University of Suffolk, transferred into there. It was around about this time that, through, I think it was post an argument, Mum disclosed to me in a real kind of EastEnders moment that the man who I'd grown up with, believing to be my father, wasn't actually my real dad. And I then had to pick the worst time, and I was just about to go off to work, go to work at a pub at the time, and I sort of got the bomb dropped on me that he wasn't my real dad. Then questions followed there, where did I come from, who am I, identity crisis, what's going on here, and I was, so mum told me that I was donor conceived. So I was an IVF baby, and basically I had no idea who my donor dad was. And that the man I'd grown up with was essentially just, essentially my stepdad, although I'd grown up with him. So at that point in my life, it was really quite difficult, because I had the kind of difficulties of managing, trying to go to uni and study, but then also family breakdown. We were going to be moving house. So it was very difficult. I do have an older brother, but he's not the most emotionally astute individual, so didn't have the best kind of support from him, and I was kind of left to my own devices. It was difficult. But I'd say probably a month or two after being informed of that, I decided I wanted to try and do a little bit of research behind it, understand it a little bit more. And then that led me on to essentially I could do a DNA search. So it's called the Donor Conceived Register. Any donor conceived individuals or anyone who has donated can go onto this register and try and link with any potential siblings or parents or whatever the case might be. And I remember at the time the people who came and did the kind of the DNA swab, they said, look, it's really low success rate, don't expect to hear anything, but at least if you go on the database, you're doing your part, you're doing the best that you can. My mum was fully behind me the whole time, really supported me doing it. By this point, kind of the marriage had broken down and my stepfather had left the house, and I think that natural distance occurred just by the way he managed the situation at the time. So I did, so gave my DNA in, that went off to the lab, kind of switched off from it and just kind of knuckled down and got on with my studying. And it was probably about a month later, I get a phone call. I come again, it was actually my mum who took the phone call from them, basically to say that they'd found a match and they'd found my dad. So mum took the call. I knew by the tone of her voice that there was something going on there. So she hung the phone up, came and spoke to me, said they'd found my dad, but unfortunately he was no longer with us, and that he'd actually passed away of a heart condition years and years prior, when I was only a few months old. But his parents were still alive, and they were dying to meet me. So just had, got all this information all at once, and then someone came from the donor register to talk to me through the kind of process, and spoke with them, exchanged info, contact details, and then kind of just start the process from there. Like, sort of introduced myself and wanted to travel to go see them, and it was just this incredible relationship just clicked all of a sudden. I was there, sat in this house with my grandparents, my dad, who I'd never met, and it was just the most bizarre dynamic, but it was something really, really positive, and I just gravitated towards it. And kind of the caveat to that was the fact that he'd passed away at a very young age. He'd only been 24 at the time that he died. So he had a sudden arrhythmia. So I'm sure you probably had seen it in a lot of football players. They just dropped down on the pitch. They had a sudden arrhythmia and they pass away, or they're revived. Back in 1989, 1990, defibs weren't to hand as they were. So he fell down dead whilst he was at home, and they couldn't resuscitate him. Quite tragic, and obviously it's something my grandma and my granddad have had to live with for the rest of their lives until I showed up. So it was amazing for them, but now I'm informed of this. There's kind of the repercussions as to whether I had inherited anything, which was a possibility at the time. So we ended up linking up with St George's Hospital, which has got a big cardiac investigations department in London. And away we went into London, had this ridiculous meeting with this top consultant in London who, almost 20 odd years earlier, had actually been the doctor who performed the pathology on my dad, who passed away, and now fast forward 20 odd years and he's the one in this meeting with my mum, me and my grandma. Completely bizarre. But from that point, I started the process, a year and a half long process of every test under the sun on me. I won't go into detail, but I was back and forth to London every couple of weeks to have all sorts of tests done. Fortunately, they never found anything, but because they never truly understood why it happened to my dad, I'll always be under kind of their cardiac investigations department. But I think the key bit I want to talk about is that kind of year and a half period where I was dealing with university, marriage breakdown, moving house, getting this dropped on me, having to go and have all these tests. I wasn't prepared for this. My kind of upbringing and my lifestyle had been very privileged, very happy, hadn't had to deal with anything, everything was sorted for me, and now all of a sudden, 21, 22, and I'm dealing with all of this all at once. So I found myself in a massive depression, struggling to grasp the concept of my own mortality, the fact that I might just drop down dead, I might have inherited some condition where it's out of my control and I've got no control over what might happen. So I really struggled. I put on a lot of weight. I kind of isolated myself. I didn't speak with friends. University, I was kind of just going in for lectures and then coming out, not socialising with anyone. And then hopping on the train to London to go and have all these tests done. So I ended up in a really dark place, and it did lead to one particular time when I almost decided to take my own life. There's that sense of control and wanted to try and get that back into my life, but I stopped. I didn't go all the way through with it. And for me, it was just the thought of family and the thought of someone informing my mum or informing my grandparents, my new grandparents, what happened, and I couldn't bring myself to go through with it, which was the right choice. It was definitely the right choice, and I think from that moment on, everything. I think I kind of got overwhelmed by it all, and I couldn't break it down. But from that point onwards, I just started to manage things a little bit better, and I dove back into my fitness, and running became a thing. I got back into the boxing gym, and I got myself into a much better place. And it was a long time. At the time that happened, I didn't speak to anyone, so I wasn't speaking about where my mental health was. I didn't fully understand it myself. So it took a lot for me to manage that on my own, but I did. And it wasn't till many years later that I actually decided to open up to people about it and tell them what had been going on. And then the long story short, fast forward sort of several years, got to a point where I was a lot more comfortable with myself, and kind of the journey that I've been on, and through various different things that happened, I ended up getting into the London Marathon, which was kind of a lifelong dream, and that was kind of the starting point for me just to where I'm at now, because I shared my story. I went into depth about kind of my mental health and things that I've been through, and it's put me into a position now where obviously I was fortunate enough to meet Sam, and we've started this podcast, which has led us to meet lots of different people and share stories. And for me, where I'm at now, if I can have an impact on any individual to feel like they can make a change in their lives or have an impact which has a bit more of a positive mood lift on them, then I'm happy doing what I'm doing. Along the way, obviously that happened. That was kind of the starting point. There was lots of ups and downs, but I'm in a far better place now. It's been a hell of a journey. It's only the beginning, as I like to say. I'm just conscious of time, so I don't want to leave it there. We'll leave it there.
Me and Jack give each other shit all the time. We give each other banter, but I really am proud of you, mate, and thank you so much for everything you do for the podcast. You work really hard behind the scenes, and I look forward to the future, mate. You're a really good friend as well, so I appreciate it.